So, welcome everybody to the Masterclass in Content Design and all things words and language. My name's Dom. I'm a senior content designer here at Kaluza. Bit about me. I've worked for all these brands you can see on the right-hand side, Nationwide, Barclays, Mercedes-Benz Retail Group, FSCS, amongst other various agencies as well. I've been writing content professionally since 2011. I've edited 3 novels, including 1 Amazon bestseller. Most of the way done through writing my own novel. I've done a couple of creative writing courses and various training at in-house companies. So yeah, that's me. Firstly, I wanted to address why I think it's important that people should learn how to design great content. Part of your job is to write things. That might be Slack messages, emails, presentation decks, those kinds of things. Actually, so much of what we do in a professional business environment is simply just writing. And you get paid to do that. If the majority of your job is just sitting and writing things in boxes, I would argue that to a degree, you are already a professional writer. But writing isn't straightforward, language is complex, and how to write well isn't obvious. Great writing is hard. Well, it seems hard. I don't think it is once you know the rules. Once you can talk the rules and the little tips and tricks, which I'm going to teach you throughout this whole thing, then it isn't so hard to get right. Now, this next point, I believe that it's our duty to write effectively. If you believe that what you do is important and that people, need to hear, people that you're targeting with your writing, your messages, if you believe that what you're doing is important, then it is your duty to write things well, and so that people understand your message, and to flip that on its head, if you don't optimize the way you write, you're undermining your work. You're actually saying you're undermining the quality of your work by falling at the last hurdle, by not writing things up sort of properly. You're undermining your personal brand, and no one wants that, of course. But that is the kind of the point of writing, is to make your message heard. I did originally say that I could, by the end of the session, I will double, you will double the effectiveness of your writing. It depends on where you're at with writing. If you're already an expert, maybe you won't quite double. Some people it will be more than double, but there is so much in this deck and presentation, and I'm really excited to share it with you. So here we go. So I wanted to talk to you about the power of language. Oh, wow, I'm going to pause this video.
Excuse me.
Because, yeah, I'm going to flip onto this first. So if you write words, you are a wizard. And if you know the Harry Potter movies, the famous line that will come up in a minute. By mastering words, you increase the influence you have on the world. And I'm wondering if you guys can tell me if you can hear this video.
Grounds at Hogwarts. Of course, you know all about Hogwarts.
Sorry, no.
No? Blimey, Harry, didn't you ever wonder where your mum and dad learned it all?
Learn what?
You're a wizard, Harry.
I'm a what?
A wizard. And a thumping good one, I'd wager, once you trade up a little.
No, you've made a mistake. I mean, I can't be a wizard. I mean, I'm just Harry. Just Harry.
Well, just Harry. Did you ever make anything happen? Anything you couldn't explain when you were angry or scared?
So, how was the audio, by the way? Is that okay? Cool. So, I'll explain more now of this weird analogy. Welcome to Hogwarts, School of Pitchcraft and Wordsedry. It's a terrible pun, but yeah, I couldn't resist because this whole thing is basically Harry Potter themed. So, why the Harry Potter theme? Well, this is a quote from Dumbledore, who's a character in Harry Potter. Words are, in my not so humble opinion, a most inexhaustible source of magic, capable of both inflicting injury and remedying it. Of course, he's a bit of an original gangster content designer. Words they're powerful. They can make people love us. They can make people hate us. We can use them. We use them to, commit crimes, commit fraud, to rip people off, to, make people fall in love with us, to soothe our loved ones. Language is such a given that we take it for granted, but it really is this very strange and magical power that we do possess. So, words, they come in two forms. We speak them, and they're just vibrations traveling through the air that reach this other person's ears, and they go through this process in their brain, and suddenly they understand what our intent might be, our emotion, or we can change their emotions just by these vibrations traveling through the air. It's quite incredible. And the same, possibly even more special in a way, even more unique to humans, is written language. They're just squiggly lines on a screen or a piece of paper, but they too can have the same kind of impact. You might know the phrase that the pen is mightier than the sword. However, magic wands might be a little bit mightier than the pen. So that one's up for debate. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about language and power. What are we doing when we write words? Well, we're spelling words. And the root word spellam originally meant story, or saying, or tale, history, narrative, fable, that kind of thing. And then the term spell started to take on the meaning of a charm or magical incantation in the Middle Ages. So yeah, the overlap between spelling a word and spelling or casting a magic spell have the same kind of root. And with regards to how powerful these spells are that we put on people and we cast out into the world, depends on the technique. So I'm going to mute myself now and play another clip from Harry Potter.
At least no one on the Gryffindor team had to buy their way in. They got in on pure talent.
No one asked your opinion, you filthy little mudblood. She'll pay for that one, Malfoy. Eat slugs!
You okay, Ron? Say something! Wow! Can you turn it around, Harry?
No, Colin, get out of the way. Let's take him to Hagrid. He'll know what to do.
Pretty grotesque scene for early on a Tuesday, so I apologise about that. This is a bit comic relief, but yeah, it kind of says to you that language, if we get it wrong, can backfire. If we get the spells right, they can be very powerful, effective, and do the job we wanted them to. But again, yeah, if we get them wrong, it can be weak, ineffective, and even backfire.
At least
So,
no one on the Gryffindor team.
the thing is with words is that nobody really writes ineffectively on purpose. The problem with writing in language is, well, there's a list. Everyone knows how to write words, aka cast spells. Well, pretty much everyone, or at least speak them. There's already a lot of content out there, and it's growing all the time. So it's just, there's so much that people get overwhelmed. Everyone is short on time, a lot of time constraints. It takes a lot of effort to read all this content. It's, it can be stressful. There's just so much out there. It's never ending. Also, the content that is out there sometimes can take a lot more effort than what is required. You have to kind of get to the bottom of content and find out what it's really trying to say. Often it's, it might be a translational issue, but not just translation in terms of language, but in terms of translating an idea from one's head into something that other people can understand, because it has to go via the medium of language. And like I said earlier, learning how to write effectively is not obvious. There are lots of kind of weird and wonderful tips that I'll go through later that have come about through lots of user testing that aren't very straightforward. And then, writing effectively, takes more time than writing ineffectively often. There's a famous quote that I can't remember who it was, but they said, I would have wrote a shorter letter if I had the time. And it's just saying that editing does take more time than just writing out a rough draft and banging it out. But I'm here to convince you that that little bit of extra time spent editing can massively, significantly increase the effectiveness of your writing and your magical abilities. So writing really ought to be all about your audience. So the first thing that we should do is start with empathy. That's the first port of call. So why do we write? I'm going to ask you both to come off mute and perhaps give me a couple of answers why you think that we write things.
To communicate our ideas.
Yeah.
To guide people to do something.
Yeah. So is that like to get them to take action kind of thing?
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, both absolutely valid. First and foremost, before we even get to that point, that's the end goal of what you're saying. And the first point of call is that so that others can read. Writer and reader, if you'll excuse my clumsy philosophical metaphors, writer and reader are like yin and yang. One depends on the other. You don't really have a reader without a writer, and you can have a writer without a reader, but it wouldn't make a great deal of sense. Your only job as a writer is to satisfy your target reader. And as a writer, you should be obsessed with your reader. Like the only reason you're doing this is that someone else can read. So, hi Obi.
Hi.
Hi. We're not too long started. We just got past the intro, and we're getting into the meat of things now. So, yeah, your reader is investing resources in you. They are investing time, energy, attention, and these are precious resources. And they're focusing on what you have to say, and they have their own goals. Sorry, this is in slightly the wrong order. They have their own goals of what they want to achieve out of reading. So your job is to give the reader exactly what they want, and that means finding out what they want first and foremost. So again, yeah, Obi, this is all very Harry Potter themed, by the way. So I hope maybe some of you have read or seen the movies. I'll ask you. So I've already asked Sarah and Giuseppe about what they want out of reading. It might be to traditionally, when it comes to like reading novels, etc., maybe non-fiction, it might be to understand, learn, remember information. It might be to be entertained, and it might be to take action. So yeah, both of your answers kind of covered there. That's, you know, people reading for business reasons versus personal reasons. There's blurry lines between those. And yeah, they might read for slightly different reasons, but the underlying principles behind it are still kind of similar. You know, primarily business readers, you know, they're not necessarily reading for joy. They're reading because they want to do their jobs better. So, you know, but that's not quite enough to make sure that people are doing their jobs better. We also need to make sure that the content is easy to read. It needs to be quickly understood, and ideally would be entertaining, even in a business environment, memorable and relevant. And by the end of this talk, you're going to know how to write content that meets these needs from a business user point of view, but also from personal users as well. This question is probably the most important question that you can ask yourself as a writer. And the question isn't about you, the writer, the question is about the reader. So put yourself in the reader's shoes. What's in it for me? Also known as, why should I care? Again, readers have needs. They want to achieve something. They've got goals. They've got motivations. Your job as a writer is to help them achieve their goals. So the most compelling thing that you can do is address this up front. Right in the start of your writing, you're giving people a reason, sometimes quite directly, to say, hey, you should read this because it is going to help you achieve your needs or fulfill your needs better than something else. And so we'll talk a bit about front loading in a bit, in terms of, you know, actually pushing people's pain points or their needs very early on, and you know, putting that at the start of pages, sentences, etc. But we'll come along to that. Like I said, directly appeal to their needs. You can kind of state them. Ask yourself, you know, at the end of a piece of writing or during, does it pass the what's in it for me test? So say, for example, you're an operations director for an energy company. Hey, Susie. We've not long got past the intro, so don't worry too much. But yes, you can see the Harry Potter theme. You know, if you're an operations director at an energy company, they, you know, one of their targets, their personal targets, the things that are keeping them up at nighttime and the things that they're worried about, you know, are they going to get their bonus, etc. They're going to be concerned with things like operational efficiency, right? How much profit can I squeeze out of, you know, can this company squeeze out by increasing revenues and decreasing costs? So it might well be that you start a sentence with, increase efficiency by automating your processes. So, you know, automating your processes is the feature, but increasing efficiency is the benefit, and I'll come on to this in a bit. But just saying that what we're doing is saying, first and foremost, you can increase your efficiency by automating your processes. And a lot of people, it's not obvious to write like that, because you could say it like, automate your processes to increase your efficiency, to flip it around that way. What you're doing, if you bury the benefit, which is increasing efficiency, if you bury it underneath the rest of the sentence, you're not flagging as clearly to the reader why they should be reading your stuff. You're not flagging what's in it for me. Again, we'll come on to that in a lot more detail and go. It's just a bit of a clunky example there. So really, you know, as a writer, just like any kind of UX job, really, you want to be thinking about the user's needs. So one that I kind of made up here, as a person on a tight budget and limited time, I need to be able to understand my energy consumption easily and quickly, so I can save money and stick to my time schedule. Hi, Karen. So if we don't meet their needs, it isn't just a failed kind of opportunity to do that. We're actually wasting their time. It isn't just a missed opportunity for us. We're almost disrespecting the reader in a way, because they have these needs. They're investing in us. They're placing their faith in us as writers and as designers, etc. And we're failing them at that. And it, you know, their customer loyalty doesn't stick around very long. So we need to respect the reader and the user in that regard. Okay, I want to go through this example from Client Earth. Now, I use Client Earth as an example because my brother works for them. So yeah, apologies to him. He didn't write this content necessarily. I think somebody else did. Client Earth are a charity dedicated to fighting climate change from a legal perspective. So they're trying to change the laws in various different countries to align with the climate agenda. I want you to have just a quick read through this for a minute. I'll give you a minute to kind of read this. So I think I'll stop everyone there. It's not vitally important to read all of it. So this is an email newsletter from them. The content itself is kind of okay, but in terms of who they are writing for, I think they've got this really, really badly wrong. I'm somebody that's explicitly signed up to the Client Earth email newsletter, and from you get the gist of this email is basically saying climate change is getting worse, and it's affecting the poorest nations worse. I think that's relatively sort of well known. It's climate change is bad, blah blah blah. We're helping with environmental justice. You've got some call to actions in the form of read more buttons. To achieve environmental justice, environmental laws and policies need to be developed, implemented, and enforced to protect everyone, regardless of where they live and how much they earn, in the bold there. Where I think that this has gone wrong is who exactly are they writing for? Again, I'm somebody that's already signed up as to their email newsletter list. Do I need to be convinced of any of this? Because it seems like the email newsletter is very much trying to convince me of this is bad, it's getting worse. what the purpose of the organization is, it's not really thinking about a user need, I would argue. And if it is thinking about a user need, it might look a little bit like this. As someone who doesn't really believe in climate change, I want to hear stories that change my mind about climate change so I can make up my mind about whether climate change is real or not. I don't know about you lot, but that sounds like a very unrealistic user story. I don't, if you don't really believe in climate change, I think that you're not going to go out proactively seeking messages that deliberately that may or may not change your mind. So yeah, it's a bit despairing, because they're preaching to the converted. If you've already gone out and proactively signed up to their email newsletters, you almost certainly don't need convincing about whether climate change is real or not, and the impact of it. Flipping back to this, read more as well. Why? What's in it for me? What do I get out of this? Well, certainly for me personally, I get very little out of reading more, because it's like, well, okay, I already know that climate change is bad. I already know that you guys are trying to help this. Why would I click that? What is in it for me? Why should I care? I care about climate change, but why should I care about spending my time and energy on clicking these call to action buttons? So the moral of the story here is that we should write for our ideal reader. And, maybe their ideal reader is somebody that isn't convinced by climate change. And if that's the case, then that's fair enough, but I very much doubt it is. Perhaps it needs, perhaps they need to do some research and find out what it is that their email subscription user base actually want to hear more about. Going to move on to reading abilities now. This is a very interesting field. Reading abilities and accessibility, they're kind of one and the same in this regard. Accessibility, usability, readability, they're all kind of the same thing when it comes to writing. Dyslexia affects 10% of the UK population. English not being a first language is about 10% as well. Average reading age in the UK is roughly 9 years old. Now, this is a bit of a misunderstood metric. What that means is that the average reading age of anyone in the UK, and reading age meaning mainly things like the speed at which they can go through text and the amount that they need to backtrack and go over things that they've read. It's not necessarily about vocabulary, because obviously a 9-year-old is going to have a smaller vocabulary on average than the average adult. So it's about, speed and ability to comprehend information, and that sits at about 9 years old, which is, if you've never heard this statistic before, it sounds very, very low. Then you also have neurodiversity, which affects, again, about 10% of the UK population. That might be things like autistic spectrum disorder, ADHD, and these percentages, they overlap as well. You might have somebody that's dyslexic and English isn't their first language, for example. And, we have an aging population. 15.21% of the UK is over 70. It's a very high number of people that it might be more difficult for them to understand modern technology. It might be they might have growing sort of memory problems. They might have dementia becomes a problem in older age. A whole onset of problems. So we really have to think about that when we're thinking about our audiences, and have these kind of things in mind. And then just a quick note about testing. One of the simplest ways to see if your writing is effective is to test it on someone. Ideally, you would test your content with real users, But if you can't get to real users, try a colleague. And if you've got no colleagues, you've got no friends, try putting yourself in the shoes of someone who fits in your target audience. Maybe put on a funny hat or something and just try and put yourself in a different scenario. I personally like to think about my nan. She's a little old Irish lady. She needs glasses. Reading isn't her strong point. I'm not sure if she's dyslexic, but she's not a great reader. She comes from a simple kind of low socioeconomic background. Technology is not really her strong point. Questions that I ask myself if I'm just drafting content is, would my nan Celia be able to understand this? Would she find it easier if the sentences were shorter, etc.? So yeah, that might even come first before you do the testing, etc. But really just putting yourself in another person's shoes first, and obviously ideally testing with real users. And then very importantly, iterate, once you've got the feedback from a colleague or whoever, iterate that based on feedback and test it again. That iterative design principle. Now we're going on to the really juicy bit. This is the tips and tricks as to how to improve your writing. So now that we've empathized with our reader, we understand the kind of reading abilities, the questions to ask ourselves about their motivations, and them investing in us. We can move into how to actually write great content. So I'm going to show this really great little video. This is from Nielsen Norman Group, which I'm sure most of you on this call have heard of. I'm going to mute myself and then play the video.
The F pattern, also known as the F-shaped scanning pattern, is an approach people take to reading on the web. We observe people reading this way when we do eye tracking research, during which we use technology which enables us to see what people are fixating on, what they're looking at as they read on the web. In action, the F pattern appears to look like the letter F. So a person begins reading on the left side of a column of text, and as they read, they move to the right. And then they move back to the left, and when they move to the right, they'll read a little bit less. And they move back to the left and read a little bit less and a little bit less. And it ends up appearing to be the capital letter F, roughly. We also see the F pattern on mobile devices, but it's smaller. And in languages when people read from right to left, like Arabic, we also see the F pattern, but it's reversed. So why does the F pattern happen? It happens because people are trying to minimize the work they need to do and maximize the benefit they get from that work. For eye tracking, that means they're trying to economize on the number of fixations that they do on a page and learn the most that they can from the content that they actually do look at. Page layout also plays a major role in whether people scan in the F pattern. If we present a wall of text to users that has no formatting and isn't written for the web, they're going to find their own path through that text. And we can do things to make it much easier for people to scan text. For example, use chunking of text. Use bullets, and more important than anything, use headings and subheadings within the text, and make those headings look different from normal text, larger, a different color, bolder, a different typeface. Any of these things can work. And with that, users are able to scan to the headings and decide if those words are things that they're interested in. And if they are, they'll read the normal text below it. And if not, they'll read to the next heading. And that's a different pattern that we see people revealing when they read on the web. And I like to call that one the layer cake pattern. I was hungry when I named that one. It resembles a layer cake with the frosting and the cake. So layer cake is a good pattern. F pattern is one that can and should be avoided.
Cool. I think what we're going to do is take a 5-minute break, because I realised I was supposed to have a break before this video, and then we'll come back and we'll delve into how specifically to write to avoid kind of F pattern or accommodate for the way that people read. But yeah, super interesting for me. This is probably one of the most important concepts as a writer, to kind of understand how exactly people read on screen and how to accommodate for that. So yeah, it's now 10:40, nearly 10:43. Let's come back at 10:48 and we'll carry on from there. So, this leads us on to a subject called front loading. Now, if you remember anything at all from this talk, this presentation, front loading, I think, is the most important principle to improve your writing. This is something that not even all writers understand, and it's actually very simple when you get underneath it all. But I think this is the thing that is going to improve your writing the most. So from the video that we watched, we understand that people tend to read the start of sentences, paragraphs, and pages. It's the things at the beginning, and that, again, people are, some people say lazy. I would like to say very efficient. We haven't got all the time and resources in the world to spend reading everything, every word on every page. We get what's called an information scent, and we're on the hunt for specific kinds of information, and rather than reading everything, we're trying to find out first and foremost whether we should delve into it. So that's what the lady was talking about in the previous video, about headers and the starts of sentences. We're trying to establish and ascertain whether we're on the right path first. Then if we find the right information, we do read more fully. Now, that's what she was talking about in the layer cake pattern. People will read in rows if if it is on the right path, and they understand that they're in the right place. So what that means is that again, like I said earlier, we want to flag very early on to the reader that they should be reading this particular content, that it's relevant for them. So this means, people get less attentive towards the end. So put the important, sexy, interesting information, whatever it is that you're using to flag to the user that they should read this, put that at the start. And that doesn't just apply to a sentence, at the start of the paragraph or the start of the page. Whatever content level you're working at, the important information should be at the start. They use this in writing in journalism, newspapers. This diagram on the right is taken from Nielsen Norman Group. It's very well known in the journalistic world, whereby they will give, the headline really could be a story within itself. And then the next level down is, it starts at need to know, and then it gets more detailed as it goes. But if you were to stop reading the article halfway through, you still would have got a gist of what it was about. We're not saving the best till last. We're putting the need to know stuff at the end. This is different, of course, from if you were writing a novel or something like that, and you don't want to put the juicy content at the very beginning. You want to tease people into reading, etc. And they do this in journalism a bit more so now. They'll allude to something but withhold some kind of detail. They'll use clickbait, that kind of thing. But for general business writing, front loading the information at the start is just absolutely vital. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples now, because I think this is so important. How can we front load this sentence. And I'm going to ask you to come off mute and have a go at just reading out to me how you might front load this.
So can we rewrite it?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, just say it in a different way. Yeah. What's another way of saying or writing this? That.
Well, you definitely. I mean, I like. Do you want me to say my idea? Or
Yes, yes, yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Well, I would have thought that. Yeah, you just say, magic wands, colon, what you need to know or something. I think the important thing is that it begins with magic wands rather than everything.
Absolutely. You get 10 points for Gryffindor. That's exactly what I wrote. So yeah, well done. Not only, so I mean, there's a few different benefits to this. It's shorter, which is great. You know, it breaks things up using that colon, which I think is quite nice in terms of you know, varying the content that's there. But most importantly, like you said, having magic wands at the beginning of it is like, you know, if I'm scanning down a page or if I'm, you know, looking through a bunch of different articles, you know, and I want to learn about magic wands, it's right there and then. So it's kind of like an on-page SEO, and I'm gonna talk about that in a bit more detail in a bit. The bit about everything you need to know is secondary information. It's like, yes, that's nice information. It's like, oh, okay, like this is going to be a comprehensive article, but the subject of the article is the most important thing. So yeah, well done, Susie. Another example. How can we, so this is a title of a meeting I had months ago. Can anybody else rewrite this to rewrite this in a different way, or re-say it in a different way? I might pick on someone if I'm not going to go with Susie. I'm afraid she's already racked up all those Gryffindor points. Is it bad if I pick on Obi? He's only just started, but he's the technical writer.
I would have gone with prioritizing. How can we make accessibility a priority? Prioritizing accessibility.
Yeah, that's a good way of doing it, actually. There's a way that you can front load it even more so, actually, though. But that is another way of writing it. So again, title of it being accessibility, just getting that up first and foremost. It's like, because this is an event that's going into people's diaries. So it's like, it's just the very first word. It's like people, okay, like I've got a meeting about accessibility. But yeah, your suggestion is good as well. What was it? Was it prioritizing accessibility?
Accessibility.
Yeah. I mean, that's just, that's 2 words and actually summarizes the whole thing almost quite comprehensively. It's shorter, but it's using 2 longer words, so it's like a bit of a trade-off. But yeah, accessibility, how can we make it priority is another way that you might word that. I don't know what house you might be in, Obi. Maybe we all I should have made everyone do Harry Potter house test.
I'll be Slytherin.
You'll be Slytherin. All right, I reckon I'm probably a Slytherin as well. So yeah, you get 10 points for Slytherin as well. Cool. So I flipped it and I cheated because I heavily edited it as well. For me, the kind of interesting information was about OVO becoming the country's 3rd largest domestic energy supplier. In January 2020, after completing the acquisition of the retail arm of SSE, you could also flip it to be, after buying the retail arm of SSE, OVO became the country's third largest energy supplier. You could chop various bits of information out of this. You know, do you need the date? They're quite long. Both of these are quite long sentences. Do you need the date? Again, you could. The point of this exercise is more to just understand that the order of things. It isn't obvious, but like the order of the information that's presented, given what we've learned about the way that people read, is very important. So, you know, perhaps the second line here, after completing the acquisition of the retail arm SSE, isn't as important. If we're focusing on OVO becoming much bigger, perhaps the first example here, becoming the third largest domestic energy supplier, is the most important. If that's the spin we're going to put on it. So yeah, just an interesting one there. So we're going to move on to readability scores and how to increase readability. Readability scores are measured on a number of things, and we're going to break down. We're actually going to go into how you can improve each one of these metrics. So number of words total, number of complex words, percentage of complex words, average words, number of words per sentence, average syllables per word, which is an interesting one, total number of sentences, whether it includes things like passive speech, which we're going to go into in quite a lot of detail. That's a really interesting one. And use of adverbs that modify verbs. Yeah. So if you can improve all of these metrics, like this is the key thing. Like that's really going to improve how readable and how easy your message is to understand. So this isn't necessarily a common metric that gets factored into readability scores. However, it is something that is proven through testing, etc., to improve comprehension. Common words or commonly used words in the English language or specific dialects. An example here: we will endeavour to assist you. Can I have a volunteer to say this in a better way, in a way that uses more common words? I'm gonna reach out to someone that isn't Susie, and if I get no one, I'll come back to Susie. Don't worry, I was that kid in school as well. Don't worry. Anybody else want to have a go?
I don't mind, but I think that actually we should all speak like that. I love that sentence.
Yeah, it's quite quite graceful in some ways. Anyone want to have a go?
It's just like, we will help you, right? Like, that's simple as.
Yeah. So the two.
Try to help, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So the two words there that are relatively uncommon, I'd say endeavour and assist. Assist probably more common. Endeavour definitely not that common. Yeah, like you said, Sarah, we will try to help you. That's just the simplest way of putting it, really. It is a literary sentence indeed. Cool. So that's, you know, just use common words wherever possible, commonly used words. That helps with people, you know, where English isn't necessarily a first language, or if they haven't got a great vocabulary. Common words also tend to be shorter, tend to have less syllables. Though it sounds very eloquent, endeavour to assist you. Even people with, this is a really interesting fact. So even people with really large vocabularies and that all might really understand the technical, you know, technical language, etc. Even they still prefer, even if they understand it, they still prefer simple language, which is interesting. Some people are like, oh, it's, you know, might say, oh, it's too dumbed down or whatever, but actually the data proves that even those with, you know, brilliant minds that have amazing vocabularies, they do prefer things when they're written simply because it takes less energy. So short words with fewer syllables. So I read a word in a book recently, monophasic. It simply means one phase. Mono meaning one, phase, phasic meaning phase. Why he didn't write, I'm going to name and shame actually. The book is called Why We Sleep by a guy called Matthew Walker. Fascinating insights. He's like the world's foremost researcher, scientist on sleep. But the editors at Penguin obviously just caved into the way that he writes because it's just needlessly complex. And if I wish kind of book publishing did take a leaf out of our UX book and did more user testing on things like this. Another word out of this book, humorous. Go on, Susie.
You already showed it.
Funny. Okay. Yeah. Let's play this game. All right. So the next one, individuals, could also be Susie.
People.
Oh, yeah. So just the alternatives have got fewer syllables. Sometimes the words, there was another one, socioeconomic as one word. That means social and economic, but some clever fart has put the words together to save time for them writing, perhaps. But it just adds like needless complexity. So even though social and economic is a longer phrase than socioeconomic, even though it's longer, it's easier to understand. So there is this trade-off sometimes between length and complexity. Short sentences. I said earlier, if you have an average sentence length that's 14 words, on average, you get a 90% comprehension. If your average sentence length is 43 words, like the task we did earlier, it drops to 10% comprehension. I don't know about you guys, but that is mental for me. That says it all. Again, if we are writing for the purpose of trying to get people to understand, short sentences are absolutely vital. These are statistics from I think the American Association of Publishing, something like that. The delete key or the back arrow key should be your favorite key on the keyboard. Delete, delete, delete. So much of the time, even as somebody as well versed as I am in writing, I still write too much. The first draft is always too long. We end up repeating ourselves. We end up saying things that aren't even necessarily relevant. Editing and deleting and deleting content, halving content is absolutely vital, as the statistics about tell you. Another tip for that is like, look at every single word that you've written and question like, do I need this? It seems like, oh God, that's going to take ages. But actually it doesn't, because very quickly the words that must be in, otherwise it doesn't make any sense, stay in. And then the superfluous or unnecessary words jump out at you very quickly. And the more of a stronger habit you build around this, the easier it becomes. And to the point where it just becomes second nature, and editing just becomes very, very, very fast. Also, you don't even necessarily need to delete words, but you can make sentences shorter just by breaking them up into other sentences, and finding out where can I put a full stop in this? Where are there these clauses that don't necessarily need to be directly connected? So yeah, I would say as a general rule of thumb, anything like your sentences should really not really ever be more than 25 words. And again, ideally, if it's hanging around that 14 or 16 words per sentence, that is probably really good. But anything more than 25 words is just, you can almost certainly cut it in half, and it would still make sense. So yeah, American Press Institute is where that stuff came from. Okay, simple sentences. I was going to the Chamber of Secrets, but I realized I had forgot my wand. Oh, sorry. I realized I forgot my wand, so I had to go back. And then Neville tried to talk to me, and I got distracted. That's why I'm late. There is the problem with this sentence is there's a lot going on, and it interrupts itself. And by the time you get to the end of the sentence, you've kind of forgotten what it said at the beginning. It's a long sentence, but the main problem, I think, is that it's just very all over the place. So another way of rewriting this would be, I was going to the Chamber of Secrets, but I realized I forgot my wand. Like that. So that's one chunk. Like that. Anything after that doesn't necessarily need to be in the rest of the sentence. That's a very firm place where you can say, okay, I was going there. You could even put a full stop before I was going to the Chamber of Secrets, full stop. Yeah, but I realized I forgot my wand. Is this a genuine quote? No, I made it up. Yeah, trying to make everything Harry Potter themed. Which was a lot of fun.
But like, do you guys not think that, I think even though Harry Potter obviously was written for children, and that adults can enjoy it, it is very eloquent yet also extremely readable. So I think she really strikes a good balance between using, slightly more interesting words, but it's still, I think, extremely readable. I really think she's extremely talented. She wasn't just like someone lucky who became rich and famous because
she was trained. I think she studied English literature and had a lot of sort of educational background in it as well. But yeah, very, very great. So yeah, you could even chop this up into even shorter sentences, like I was going to the Chamber of Secrets, full stop. But then I realized I forgot my wand, full stop. And it might be a bit too stop-start then. And equally, there is the argument that somebody that's out of breath, that's been running around, is just and is very stressed. Having this long sentence might make sense in the theme of what they've just done. Is they're just like motor mouth, But in terms of increasing comprehension for business users, etc., breaking it up into simpler clauses would be better. So yeah, the second chunk here is I went back, but I got distracted by Neville. Again, another short sentence there. There's two things going on. I went back, but I got distracted by Neville. You could break that up into individual sentences, but the flow wouldn't really be there so much. And then that's why I'm late. It says almost exactly the same thing, but it's shorter, not by a massive factor, but it's much simpler in terms of the chunking of the information that goes there. You're giving people the breathing room to, full stop. Okay, that's one thing. You're giving people that breathing room. They can put that to the side. They don't, they can kind of put that in their short-term memory. They can read on and associate these concepts together in chunks, and that's how kind of working memory tends to go. So generally, as a rule, I would say that you should have one idea per sentence, generally. Maybe 1.5 ideas per sentence. So again, I was going to the Chamber of Secrets is one idea, but I realized I forgot my wand in the second example is that's two ideas in one sentence, but they're kind of intrinsically linked. The reason why I was saying the reason he's telling you this is because I forgot my wand. So it's quite important to link those there. So you could almost call it one idea. Yeah. So yeah, break things up using punctuation is another great tip. Too much punctuation can affect readability. It can be a bit distracting for people, but it can also be a bit of a savior, especially when you get into the long grass when it comes to long sentences, etc. So, when do we have our break? I think we'll do a few more minutes. At 11:30, we'll have another break for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back. Do let me know if I run over, because my timekeeping isn't the best. So, keeping the flow. This is a similar theme to the previous example, but slightly different. This isn't a quote from the book again, Susie. I did just make this up. I was inclined at the time to cast Wingardium Leviosa, which is a spell from Harry Potter. Another way to write this is, at the time, I was inclined to cast Wingardium Leviosa. This says almost, the sentence is almost identical by the order of it. And why this is important is that there's three things going on in the first example. You've got I was inclined, and then it interrupts itself. It says at the time to cast Wingardium Leviosa. So you're on one track, then you flip to another track, which is at the time, and then you've got to flip back to cast Wingardium Leviosa in that first example. So you're flipping subjects and interrupting, and that can be quite disruptive to the flow of how people are understanding what you're trying to say, and it's just causing unnecessary kind of stress and unnecessary burden on the user. We talk like this all the time, and I think that we don't edit what we say necessarily in advance. Some people do. They really think what they're going to say before they say it. A lot of the time we just say things, we interrupt, and it's more acceptable in that kind of scenario. But if we're writing and we've got a little bit of time to edit, just flipping this to say, at the time, I was inclined to cast Wingardium Leviosa, to me, that just flows all the way through. It's got the one clause at the beginning. It doesn't interrupt itself. It's just much smoother of a way to write. Somebody kind of understand that and get their heads around it? Yeah, I think it's fairly straightforward. Right. So we're going to talk about all caps. We're going to talk about shape of words. This is a interesting video. There's no sound to this video, so I don't need to go on mute. I'm just going to play. Okay, so that's really interesting to me. So all caps, what it does, it said it destroys the shape of the word, and by the shape it means like the low-hanging G's that kind of hang off the bottom. It's the T's that go up. It's the dots on the I's. With capital letters, the shape of a word, if we go back to playing this video again. It's if you look here, there's nothing hanging above and below the middle line. It's quite blocky and square, and the shapes of the words are actually much more uniform, and that makes it harder for people to understand, particularly with dyslexia. And we're also used to reading in sentence case as well. So if you're putting things in all caps, it actually does, like, people are just not used to reading it as well as it being harder to read. So generally speaking, I would avoid it. There might be the exception of like titles, brand logos, etc. But the science is there. It is harder to read. It might not necessarily look as good. Sometimes it looks a bit uneven and asymmetrical, but it is easier to read because of those reasons when things are in sentence case. So you can imagine OVO, their logo just being capital O, lowercase v, lowercase o again, or Kaluza on our website, on our official logo, it's all in caps. It might look weird if it was written, the logo itself was in sentence case, but again, people would probably understand it more. Cool. We're gonna have a 5-minute break, so I'll see you all back here at 11. So formatting. This doesn't sound like the sexiest thing about content design, but it's so important. What did Adobe say as well? Spot on with the base. Great. Okay, cool. So I'll talk to you a bit about contrast. I don't know about you, but when I see a block of text like this, my brain just goes, this, I'm going to rip apart a block of content that I took from a local plumbing business in Bristol. Apologies to that business if you ever watch this, don't think you will, but maybe you'll learn something. There's loads of errors in it. It's block of there's so much wrong with it, and so I'm going to use lots of variations of examples on this about how you might improve something like this. So again, also another reason why you would want to create contrast is because people skim read, they're efficient, they want to be drawn to headers, that kind of thing. So we'll talk about that. Our eyes are drawn to things that stand out is the main reason that you would want to create contrast. So a very simple way of creating contrast and variation in the eye, make it pleasing to read, add in images. Very simple way. They can help people understand what the page might be about. They can be just decorative in terms of breaking things up. They might, they should complement the words and not necessarily replace the words, I would say. And of course, it should be accessible in terms of all text, etc. Looking at this, I assume the first thing that jumps out to you is the bold text, and maybe the colors from the underlines of where it's all gone wrong. But yeah, bold text is a great way to do that. Now, if the whole thing was in bold text, obviously none of it is going to stand out. It's about creating that contrast and using bold text in a minimal way to make specific key points stand out. Same again, if half of it was in bold and half of it wasn't, half of each sentence, specific bits were half in bold, that also isn't going to create enough contrast as well. It's the ratio which is important. Hyperlinks, another way. They're usually blue. Although they're green, you can set it to different colors. I think Google tested some inordinate amount of colors for hyperlinks. I think they tested something like 40 different colors, and that blue is the one that people engaged with most on their landing, on their search engine results page. So bear that in mind in future if you're ever choosing hyperlink colors. Somebody give me a shout. What stands out to you on this page? Your
number.
The number. Numeral numbers, as in written as an actual number rather than a word, they tend to jump out. They tend to stand out on a page more so. I can't help but see that 12. I don't know if I'm biased, but it instantly is one of the first things that I see. It might be because of the novelty of it, but yeah, it just always jumps out to me as a thing. Not only is it good to use numbers because of contrast, but it's also proven that numeral numbers are easier to understand than written words as numbers. So I think it becomes a bit different when it comes to millions and millions of billions, etc. But generally speaking, style guides, they'll say, oh yeah, if the numbers are 0 to 9, we write them as words. The number 2 would be the word 2 rather than the numeral. However, the data doesn't support this, and actually you pretty much always write the numbers as numerals, and it will increase comprehension and make the number stand out more so as well. Perhaps maybe if you're writing the number 1, but you're saying, one example of this, you wouldn't necessarily use the number 1 there because it's a slightly different context. But I think we jumped out here.
Emoji.
Emoji. Boom. Emojis are simply just little images. It's just the first thing that jumps out. So, breaking up your text with emojis, if it's an appropriate scenario, can be useful. It can draw the eye. It can make things a bit fun. There is some guidance on this in the Kaluza style guide about using emojis. They're questionable in terms of accessibility because though they're good, I think, they're often very small and they're quite hard to see. And, that pink thing on the screen kind of stands out, but if you're quite far away, like, what is that? And you have to really go up to it and see that it's a little brain. So one piece of advice I would say when using emojis is never use an emoji instead of a word. Getting people to understand and interpret the emoji instead of the word is bad news because it's not good for localization. Different images mean different things in different cultures. For example, the peace sign with the 2 fingers. In the UK, it means one thing. In other cultures, it means very different things. So you kind of got to be a bit careful about that and how things might get interpreted. But also, yeah, some of them are just quite hard to see. There's so much detail on them, and they're very small. So simplistic emojis that are commonly used, I would say, are better. And again, use them as a complement or as an additional prompt to visualize what it's saying, but don't rely on it exclusively to convey what is being said. If you rely on it exclusively, it is open to interpretation. So use it as a complement to text. Bullet points. I love bullet points. I don't know if my novel, there's a method called the snowflake method. I just started my novel with bullet points. You just write out your basic points, like your beginning, middle, and end, and then you multiply it out into longer, more bullet points, and you've got a longer story. And then yeah, you can take it out and get it out from there. But the reason why they're great is because they force you to be brief. Bullet points look weird if they're really long, and it kind of defeats the point. They're also proven to draw the reader's eye. And they break up text. If you've got a big long wall of text, they break things up, and there's a close sibling of the bullet point, which is numbered lists. These are also known as ordered lists. So they have much of the benefits of bullets, but you could argue they're even better in some ways. They help improve navigation. They act like a, they've got the benefit of having order on top of what bullets have. So, as a reader, if you lose where you are, if you're somebody that's constantly reading back and don't understand, or you're struggling to understand the content, having ordered lists allows you to use the numbers as a reference to go back. Or if you're trying to communicate to somebody else, you say, oh, hey, it's like 0.3 in this list. Whereas a bullet is more vague, you don't really have that benefit there. Number is also engaging, they convey more meaning than bullets as well. It's like 7 things you should know about magic wands, and it's engaging in the sense of like, okay, I've read the first few, I know that there's 7, I want to know what number 7 is, which might be the most important one of them all. It can be quite engaging. A drawback of ordered lists or numbered lists is that it can make the content seem busier. You're simply adding more characters into the mix, which can make the content look a bit busier, whereas those nice dark bullet points, they create a bit more of a contrast. So pros and cons. This is a little tip and trick that isn't very well known. So you've got the primacy and recency effects in lists. That means that the first and last things in a list are more likely to be read and remembered than the things in the middle of a list. So if I had a list of 5, and say I've got 5 benefits of the Kaluza platform, if I was doing a bullet list, the most important information that I would rank would go first in the list. The third most important point, I would put second in the list. The least important information, I would put third in the list, which is in the middle of the 5. The fourth most important, fourth. And the second most important, I would put last. So just to go at that order, the first and last bullet points in this list of 5 would be the 2 most important pieces of information. And this really defies a lot of logic, but from all the research around the primacy recency effect, that would dictate that this would get the most people reading it. Yeah, I know it's crazy. It seems really crazy, but yeah, it's great. So yeah, especially because you think the last thing in the list is like the least important, but the way that people scan on pages and the way that people remember things, it is in this format. So yeah, really fascinating. So we've got 12 minutes left. I think we're doing okay for time. I think headings and subheadings, really important, really undervalued. This screenshot is taken from a Google Doc, the Google Doc that I used to create this deck. Headings and subheadings help give a document a good structure and information architecture. So H3s or heading 3s get lodged underneath heading 2s in terms of the format. So why that's useful for people on the page is that they visually can denote, okay, this subheading is a part of this section, and they've really improved readability and allow people to scan easier, and they allow people to chunk information into bigger chunks as well. They also help with tables of content, you can see here that this H4 is listed under the H3, which is listed under the H2. And so, yeah, Google Docs automatically creates a table of content based on that heading structure. If you just bold the text as a header, it doesn't give you that hierarchy. And particularly for end users, that's not very useful. All the headings kind of look the same, particularly if it's a longer document. So yeah, you can see here on the right, that's what it looks like in Google Docs. I'm a massive advocate for using these tags that you can apply to the text. I'm going to skim through a bit about SEO. SEO, search engine optimization. Google bot that decides how a page is going to be ranked on its search engine results page. It does it based, like, it isn't just some random thing that Google decides, oh yeah, we're going to make this random rule about this one thing, and then, you know, people have got to change all of their websites and gear it towards this one particular rule because we feel like it. They do it actually because they try to align their bot as much as they can to users and how users read things on pages and what users want out of pages in terms of structure and heading and scanning and all of these reading behaviors that we talked about earlier. So, you know, SEO is often about fixating on keywords and, you know, so make sure that you put keywords in your headers. Again, the front loading, we talked about front loading earlier, putting the very thing that people are looking for, be it magic wands or some kind of magic, is it called flu dust? They use in Harry Potter, putting that up front in the headers especially, Google really rewards you for that. But it's not just Google, the humans will reward you for that as well. But it's like, this is what I'm looking for, I'm going to read this. Or you're respecting them by front loading the information at the start of the header. And if they very quickly can decide that this information and this content is not for them, it's not appropriate for them right now, they're kind of going to thank you for that anyway, because you're respecting their time, you're giving them that time back rather than being vague and say, oh, this might be about this, and then having to read through the whole thing to only then realize that it's not relevant. People are going to be frankly pissed off. And it's just frustration, adds to stress, all of that. So one heading example might be, what is it? No. What is an API? That's better. So even if, say, the H2 above it is talking about APIs in general, and then you say, what is it underneath? You could say, oh, okay, well, you know, but the section above is talking about APIs, so I can be a bit vague and say, what is it? But actually, if you just say, what is an API, it's, again, allowing people to scan read. You're not asking them to have to remember what came above it, and you're not asking them to go backwards to understand. You know, if I said, what is it? And I've just scrolled all the way halfway down through a page, I've not read the section above it. What is it? I'm going to have to go back up and understand what it, the pronoun it, means. So, yeah, just be specific whenever you can. Yeah, God, time's really gone fast. I better whiz through this. Text alignment. I was going to ask you what you found to be easier, but I'm just simply going to tell you that center aligned text and right aligned text are harder to read than left aligned text. It's a quick video on this. Again, there's no sound, so I'm gonna. That's left aligned. So a fairly standard reading pattern. Sorry, I'm just going to skim through this. So center aligned text, the beginning of the sentence is not in the same place each time. So that means that the reader, if we go back here, see this blob here, their eye automatically, because they're so used to reading in a certain way, their eye automatically goes back to where they would normally read from, but there's nothing there. So it causes extra, what's called a saccade, which is a movement of your eye, or a fixation. It causes unnecessary eye strain and movement, and people having to do more work than they need to. It's the same with right aligned text, is even bigger jump, and then justified text, which makes all the ends of the lines the same. Again, people are not used to reading that. Their eyes, yeah, it's just not as good. So spacing. Paragraphs are your friend. If delete is your favorite key on the keyboard, which it should be after this, the return key should be a second favorite key. The BBC, if you go onto their news articles, they very rarely, if ever, have more than 2 sentences in one paragraph. They took this approach quite some years ago. I think after doing some research, I found that it just improves comprehension. Just having 1 sentence for 1 paragraph, there's no shame in that at all. And actually, it improves comprehension because it gives it that room to breathe. People can chunk things a lot easier. Yeah, so increases comprehension. You can do this on any kind of document. Two documents, exactly the same content, except I went and put in some manual line breaks between both the content at the top and in the bullets themselves. So if you, on any keyboard, if you press Shift and return, it creates a manual line break between bullets. So it doesn't create a new bullet, but it creates the space between bullets. That can really just gives it that breathing room, gives it that extra space, and will increase comprehension. I mean, you can see the difference, especially when you get down to here in all these bullets. All I've done is increase the spacing, and you can just compare the two, and it's just so much easier on the right-hand side. You can do this even in Excel spreadsheets. You can use Alt or Option and Enter, and that creates a manual line break within a cell. You know, I had this before. This was an update. Yeah, I created a little list by adding some manual little bullet dashes, and then doing the line breaks in between. And you can see here the difference between the understanding. I talked before about abbreviations and why they suck. I'm not going to go into that now because we've got 2 minutes left. But abbreviations are the work of the devil. Try and avoid them if you can. They only save time. They basically only save time for the user and not really for anyone else. They decrease comprehension. Same with jargon. End of Q2. What does that actually mean? People are going to have to work it out. Just speak plainly and say end of June wherever possible. I'm not going to go into any of that. Active versus passive speech. Mice are loved by owls. It's passive. Owls love mice. It's active. So you've got passive voice is when the subject is receiving. It sounds like the subject is receiving the action passively. Mice are loved by owls. Owls love mice. The subject is taking the action actively. And you can see they mean the same thing, but they're worded in different ways, and one sounds a lot better than another. I'm probably going to run over by a few minutes. Apologies in advance, and feel free to drop off if you need to go. Not only is active voice in this case shorter, but it just sounds more natural and more interesting. Mice are loved by owls. We'll go on to an example here. The car was being driven by Ron. You flip that into Ron was driving the car. Elephant was scared by the mouse becomes mouse scared the elephant. turbine was blown by the wind becomes the wind blew the turbine. Classic example, mistakes were made. This is a politician saying this in 1870s. Yeah, Ulysses S. Grant. Problems with this is that it's vague. Mistakes were made by who? It's impersonal. Again, doesn't say who made the mistake. It kind of sounds dishonest as well. It's like deflecting responsibility. And also writing in this way is kind of boring. It doesn't really, it's so vague. It's not really saying much at all. So a better way to write mistakes were made would be, we made a mistake. That's taking responsibility. You could advance that further by saying, sorry, actually apologizing for it, we made a mistake. Take it to the furthest extreme, sorry, we made a mistake. We're looking into the problem to ensure this magical mishap won't happen again. It's taking responsibility, but it's also saying, we're going to fix this. And it's much more personal. And this is the kind of tone that, Ovo and the likes, Kaluza as well, have very much adopted. So, and a great example that I think came from Monzo's tone of voice and then was written up by the guy who does sketch explanations. If you can add by monkeys, the phrase by monkeys, onto the end of your speech, it probably means that it's passive text. So this bug will be fixed by monkeys as passive. It doesn't really talk about the subject, being us fixing it. Active, we'll fix this bug. And then if you add on by monkeys, it doesn't make sense. We'll fix this bug by monkeys. Nope. So that's a great way of looking at it. We're going to do one more content critique. Let's analyze the main text first. So we know, for example, well, first of all none of that's probably needed. We know, for example, it's interrupting itself. So the flow already, within the first 4 words, it's already interrupted itself. The REM sleep increases our ability to recognize and therefore successfully navigate. So again, some quite long words already. The kaleidoscope of socioeconomic signals that are abundant in human culture. So again, kaleidoscope, it's a great word, but it's long, and does everyone know what that means? You've got to think about the metaphor actually of a kaleidoscope of socioeconomic signals. What does that actually mean? Well, it just means like a wide, colorful variety of things. Okay. And then that's already distracted you from what the sentence is trying to say, because it's such an uncommon and visual word, and sometimes that creativity can actually get in the way of saying what you're trying to say. Signals that are abundant in human culture, such as overt and covert facial expressions. Well, facial expressions can only be overt or covert, meaning hidden or not hidden. So why not they cancel each other out. So you could just say facial expressions. Major and minor, again, same thing, they cancel each other out. So bodily gestures, also known as body language, and even mass group behavior. And we can all see that quite clearly that it's a pretty ridiculous sentence. It's how many words is that? Did we say earlier? It was 44 words, which we know that's only 10% of people are going to understand that after reading the first time. That is a editing and writing fail from the author and their publishing house. So Penguin, Random House, don't know what you're doing, sort it out. You guys would do well to be in the editing department already. So yes. Yeah, so we'll go back to the presentation. yeah, I've already talked about it. So extra long sentence, interrupts flow, long words with lots of syllables, and uncommon words. Just not necessary. You perhaps before it sounded more eloquent to some people, but actually you're just alienating 90% of your user base. Who wants to do that? So the way that I would have written it is, I've even kept in for example, actually, because of the context that comes before it. That's kind of cheating. We know that readability helps us navigate social signals, breaking that sentence up. This includes facial expressions, body language, and even mass group behavior. I would argue that the top and bottom are almost saying the exact same thing, yet the second one is half as long, it's 2 sentences, it's commonly used words, and I imagine the comprehension on that would be far, far greater, and you've all done such a fantastic job at editing that. So, we're at the end now. In summary, the most important thing we've learned today is that there is an infinite source of Harry Potter references that you can shoehorn into a presentation deck. You've learned why it's important to get the language right in terms of people's motivations. People don't they don't read every single word. They're short on time, etc. Yeah, about what their motivations are, what's in it for me. We've learned how people read. People, the eye movements, what kinds of things they're looking for. We've learned about front loading and putting the important information first, and also how to write simply. We've learned that abbreviations suck, and we did a bit about active versus passive speech as well. And that is the end.